Thank you, Andy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isaac Grant. I am part of Northwest Community Credit Union. Very proud to be a Power Partner sponsor. I think this is our third year as a Power Partner sponsor, which is fantastic. A little bit about our credit union, and if the speakers want to come forward, I'll start introducing you as you make your way up to the stage here. Northwest Community Credit Union has been serving the communities of Oregon since 1949. We started as Weyerhaeuser Federal Credit Union when 50 Weyerhaeuser employees, 6 Weyerhaeuser employees put $50 in a lunchbox, and now we serve most of the major communities here from Portland down to Medford. We're based out of Eugene. We're over at the coast, and we're over in Central Oregon as well. So it's a real privilege for us to be a Power Partner sponsor of the CCIM chapter, specializing. My role is in, obviously, commercial real estate lending. We'll do conventional loans, your passive investor, owner-occupied. Please do keep us in mind for any of your real estate needs. You may notice from just listening to my voice, I'm not from around here. I am from the south of England, born and raised, been in the States for about 8 years now, and I think the only reason they really gave me the opportunity to stand here in front of you today was for the accent, for the voice. It's kind of a last-minute call from Matthew Conser, who's unfortunately not with us today, but I did want to just to let all of you know, there's a lot of work that goes into putting each of these sessions on. Just being invited to moderate today's session, I got to see kind of some of the behind the scenes effort that goes into actually putting these together. So many of you may be aware, some of you may not be aware, but David Moore, I don't know what his official title is, but our education chair committee person, why don't we just give him a round of applause for all the work that he puts into putting these sessions on. We really appreciate it. We're talking about international investing here today, and so let me introduce you to our 3 panel members. We're extremely fortunate to have such a great panel here today. Firstly, we have Jack Chu. Jack has a unique background in business investment and real estate management. He is well regarded as a subject matter expert in Asian market development and a trusted advisor to those international investors. He's been recognized for his ability to build strong relationships with influential individuals and organizations while orchestrating and negotiating complex strategic partnerships, alliances, and joint ventures. His real estate experience includes development, brokerage, and investment management. His expertise includes financial and investment analysis, portfolio management, and negotiation. He has been a proud CCIM designee since 1994, which I make that 23 years. How 1994 is 23 years ago, I don't know. Even for those of us with younger-looking faces in the room, that's ridiculous. We were in a restaurant the other day, and there was 1996 up on the wall, and I was like, why on earth is 1996 up on the wall? And then I realized that's like the year you had to have been born to be a legal age of, like, folks born in 96 can drink. That's not right. That's silly. So yeah, Jack Chu has been a CCIM member longer than the legal age to drink as of today. So we're really, really fortunate to have Jack with us.
Thank you.
Started when he was 12.
What was that? Started when he was 12 years old? Yeah, that's about right. We also have with us Todd Zolk, who you've already heard from. He's been with Wells Fargo for almost 8 years in business banking and commercial lending, doing both conventional and SBA loans. He's known within his bank as a deal maker for getting deals done. Todd's also included for us here some personal interests, such as hiking, backpacking. He's a past member of Clark College Foundation as part of the fundraising committee. Current member of the Vancouver Evergreen and Battleground School District General Advisory Committee. I did well to get that out. Co-chair of the Salvation Army of Clark County. Silver Star Research and Rescue for Lost Hikers, also volunteers weekly with Portland Rescue Mission, and is co-chair for the membership committee here at CCIM. Thank you for being with us, Todd. We also have, very fortunately with us here today, Alan Brickley, who is retired counsel from First American Title Company, been involved in title insurance and real estate legal industry for over 55 years, beginning as a poster locator in Oregon City. He is active in industry matters, particularly as a member of various legislative committees. Attended Portland State University, J.D. Northwestern College of Law, Lewis and Clark and College, and has an MBA from the University of Oregon. So go all those sport teams. He is currently an adjunct professor at Portland State University and has also taught at Clackamas Community College, Merrillhurst University, Northwestern College of Law at Lewis and Clark College, Willamette University, and various presentations to groups such as Real Estate and Land Use section of the Oregon State Bar, where he was chosen outstanding member for the year 2015. In addition, his career in the title industry, he has been involved in civic affairs as the mayor of West Lynn and a member of City Club of Portland. Thank you for being with us today, Alan. We're going to get things kicked off here by having Jack share one of his presentations that he has here. And Jack, why don't you just share a little bit with us about your background with international investors, especially from Asia and China, and what that has involved up until this point.
Thank you. As Isaac introduced, I'm Jack. I'm a CCIM, and it's been a while, but I actually grew up here in Portland, educated here, got my MBA from Golden Gate University, and but spent the last 16, 18 years in China in a variety of different positions, from board directors to a vice chair for a listed company in Australia. So I spent quite a bit of time with this particular group. Still travel frequently over there. In fact, tomorrow I'm leaving for China. So I want to talk. Let's see, move this thing. So today I'm going to talk about what the market is like in the Chinese investment in commercial market. This is one of the fastest group of foreign investors in the U.S. today. Depending on what statistic you look at, is anywhere between 29% to 33% of the foreign investors are invested in the U.S. market today. And we'll look at a little bit about who the players are, and why are they investing here, and how do they invest, and what are some of the ways that they invest, and what are the challenges or some of the obstacles this investor face, and then the cultural aspect of the working with the Chinese buyer, which is one of the biggest obstacles. And then what's in store for us in the future. We're working with that, and then I can answer a question when a little later. So what is the Chinese investment commercial market is like? So let's look at some of the numbers. Chinese investor last year in 2016 dumped about 19.2 billion into this U.S. commercial market, and of that, two of the deals from the insurance, Chinese insurance company amounts to about 13 billion. You think that may be a lot of money invested in it? It isn't actually, because the Chinese insurance company, like the institutional investor, they are actually looking to put 15% of the assets into the real estate investing. And their current asset is 1.83 trillion of the asset. So we look at this just a just the tip of the iceberg of the investment. Between 2010 and 2015, there are a total of 17 billion of the 93 billion were invested in the commercial real estate. Sorry, not moving as fast. Aside from the investments from the Chinese insurance company, there are new programs in China that is going to encourage the individual in Chinese to put their money in the rest of the world. Theoretically, actually, they can go up to like 661 billion. That's a pretty large number, but the China is also growing quite a bit. So who are the players? There are three basic types of the investors in China today. The first group, as I mentioned earlier, is the insurance company, and they are going to be continued to be buying a lot of properties as an assets to hold. And as I said, you can do the math of 15% of what 1.83 trillion is like, and that's what they're going to be planning to do that. And the second group is the developers from China. They're mostly home builders in China. With the changes in China today, many of them are coming to look for opportunity, development opportunities here in the U.S. Some of the areas that China is trying to control the property value going too high. How high that is? Does anybody know where Shenzhen is? Shenzhen, China? Okay. Shenzhen is right next to Hong Kong. Last year, the beginning of the year, the property value increase is like 65% year to year, 1 year. Okay, so that's actually getting really hot. So that's probably one of the reasons why the government is controlling that. So the third group is, of course, the wealthy individual. Many of those wealthy individuals are some of them are the corrupted government officials who move the money over here. But that actually already, I think that's mostly is pretty much slowed down quite a bit, because with the current administration in China, that's slowed down quite a bit. But these wealthy individuals actually are growing, because I'm going to mention a little bit later on the biggest group in China is growing today is the middle class. Middle class is I think it's reached over 450 million already. This middle class. So these are the people, the new wealthy individual. I mean, they're not as wealthy as the previous group, but they're going to make up part of that wealthy individual of the investment. So why are they investing here? First of all, many of these people that they make the money, they sometimes overnight, and I mean literally overnight, because one government change about a particular place, they used just a farmland, become a very expensive real estate. So that's how they make lots of this money. So they also know that the Chinese also knows that the money that they make overnight, it'll be gone pretty fast. So as I was telling you earlier about the city of Shenzhen, in 2016, earlier the year, they were, the property appreciated 65% year to year. But later part of the year, when the policy changed, the drop on the property value is like 8% month to month. So it goes up and goes down very rapidly. So what they wanted to do is to try to preserve their wealth. And U.S. property is one of the best in the world to put the money in. So, and then they wanted to, second reason is that they wanted to demand for a stable return and then we have a variety of different assets that will give them the stable return. So the earlier of the investment cycle, a lot of them, they just want to park the money here. It's just like a Swiss account, so they're not too concerned about the return on that. But then later on, now they're getting more into like what we look at in investment in terms of looking for a return as well. They don't have to look at a huge return like they do in their country, but they do look for more stability. And of course, immigration is one of the reasons for a lot of them. They wanted to move into this country. So a lot of you probably heard about EB-5 programs, because they will bring them into this country and then allow them to have more education opportunity for their family and the kids. So how do they invest, and what are some of the ways they do that? Well, they do direct investment. So the institution investors are the one that does the direct investment. JV with the local developers. This is like the second group that I was talking about. The developers, they do residential development in China, and they're looking for opportunity to work with local developer here. They also know that they don't know this market well, so they like to participate and join with the other developer in that sense. And then investment through investment fund, and this is one of the newer way in China. They especially in Shanghai, there's more this type of fund setting up, so they get the money from the smaller individual and then use that to invest in the U.S. That including some of the other area that they weren't touching before, like Arizona, like Texas, and other places. So where they do flipping as well. And then, of course, lastly, this is the EB5 investment. Does anybody want me to go into a little bit deeper on EB5? If not, I'm going to pass it. Okay, I just do quickly some of the numbers. So, the pilot program started in 1993. Each year, the USCIS, which is the immigration, they allow up to 10,000 green cards to be given to the investors. The investments are 1 million for the regular, what they call regional centers, and then if they are in a targeted employment area, which means that they're lower income, that is 500,000. The process takes about 3 to 5 years, and then when they invest, it has to create 10 jobs along with the investment. And so if after 2 years, if they're not doing what their plan said they were going to do, USCIS actually has the right to take away their green cards. So that's the risk for some of the people may not want to do that. Up to now, the 75% of the money from EB5 come from Chinese investors. There are some uncertainty over the programs, and with the new, our president, we don't know, some may change. And we think that the amount is going to go up in terms of investment. So since 2012, at least 8.7 billion has been raised through this method, and 35,000 jobs has been created. Okay. So what are the obstacles and challenges of this investor in the U.S.? For one, it's the lack of the proper direction and help from the professionals. Next slide, I'm going to talk a little quickly on that. Is the Chinese? They always trust their own people, even if they're incapable. They trust them. So lots of time, the first if they come to this country, first thing they do is they buy a residential house. So they will go in with the residential brokers, which they don't know anything about the commercial, and invest from there. So Chinese still depend a lot on relationship, which is in Chinese called guanxi, which is the cultivated relationship. They also rely on their own people. Sometimes the people, they are not capable, but they still rely on them. I work with a group from Wuhan that they actually have their own, like a dozen of their own staff here in LA working on the projects, and including a lawyer from China. Okay, but I don't know how the lawyers in China knows anything about the law here in the U.S. So the other obstacle also is the money getting out of China. Okay, a lot of you guys probably hear that. There's more restriction for doing that. But I do work with another a group, money exchange group in UK, that we can has a special way of moving their money out of China. So if anybody needs any help, I can help them with that. So cultural barrier is another one. As you know, the Chinese works a little differently. How many of you ever work with the Chinese investors? Okay, what what are one of the things that you think what are the special characteristic of working with them?
They overcommit and underproduce.
Yeah. So they want a lot of information and they want the information now, but when you
When you sign the contract, that's the starting of the negotiation.
right.
not the end of it.
Right.
You gotta spend a lot of time, spend a lot of time to gain the trust.
Right.
There's a lot of references within the country that you're working with before they'll even give you a moment of your time.
Exactly. So the next slide I'm gonna look at it. It looks like very complicated. It looks like a little crack on your driveway, but actually this is what guanxi is. It's a cultivated relationship. So they go through their mothers, sisters, daughters, brother, and all the way from different places to reach to the point where you have that relationship. So you need to understand the complexity of working with them, and then you need to spend time to develop that relationship with. A quick story I want to tell you is that my wife, I had a call a couple weeks ago from my wife's MBA classmate. They were visiting in the Grand Canyons area, and then so they actually came to ready to buy the property. They already have the money transferred out and ready to go buy the property, but she was on the phone crying to my wife, and then we asked further why. Well, because they were visiting in Grand Canyon, and at home they just horse around with each other. They kicking around doing this is no problem. Well, her husband got arrested because they were playing around on the line. Somebody because he kicks her, and then so they call the cop, and then they put him to jail. So. What happened is that the story is that I tried to help her out because she didn't have anybody else there. We tried to work out, help her try to get him out of there as quickly as we can. But
Out of jail, right? Not the Grand Canyon. Nobody fell in.
no.
Okay.
So anyway, so I think what I want to say is that they came to look for property, but they don't even look for us to help. But part of them, because I guess they never talk about what I actually do. But now, because of this instance, now we have a relationship now. So now she's the one that wants to talk to me about what type of property he's going to buy. So this is what we're talking about in terms of relationship. Lots of time, if you have built up a relationship, things goes a lot easier than what you guys talked about earlier. I have clients actually. They just dump the money, go invest. They don't even look at what you need, and they don't even look at what the return is, because there's some money, they trust you. So if they have the trust, you actually works a lot easier. So what is in store for us? Well, short-term wise, there's more restriction on the capital flight from China. Long-term is still a great opportunity because more money are still going to, China is still going to allow more money coming out because they want to make the currency to be more worldwide. So one of the new programs, they call it QDII, which is the Qualified Domestic Individual Investors, which they allow them to invest 1/2 of what the asset is. So if you calculate all the asset, theoretically, like I said earlier, that could be up to around 600 billion. Okay, so investment money is still coming, as I said earlier. You have that insurance company who's doing that. So China. So in conclusion, then China is still a country under tremendous growth, so there's still a lot of wealth creating every day. And then China's middle class is rising, as I mentioned earlier. It's gone up to over 450 million now. And China's domestic situation change from time to time. It's going to cause, those residential developers who wants to continue do what they're doing and looking for other opportunity. So in U.S., it's one of the places that they can do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jack. We'll have, we'll have time for questions at the end, hopefully for each three of the panelists. Shifting gears here a little bit, Todd. For those in the room, we saw a lot of hands there go up for those who have dealt with foreign investors. From a lending point of view, what are you looking for when you get a foreign investor coming in and they're wanting to buy? How experienced of an investor are you looking for? And what are some of the factors, and how do you make sure that the person investing is able to do that here in the United States?
There's a lot of questions in that.
There you go.
Isaac.
Just getting them all out at once.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm going to go over some of that in my presentation, but mainly it's somebody that has the wherewithal that's here in the U.S., and then some of those connections internationally. And I'm going to drill into that when I go into my presentation, so I don't want to steal my own thunder. But we do have solutions that we can get that done.
Very good.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
You want me to jump in? Is that
Yes,
right
sir.
to go? Okay, wonderful. So I just want to mention with all these MBAs around here that I do have a degree from the School of Hard Knocks, and I do use that one as well. So just for the record. Wells Fargo's changed the game in commercial lending and even in international lending, and it's pretty exciting to see some of the things that we're trying to do. And I'm just curious, before I jump in, how many of you have actually done a deal with an international investor? If you would raise your hand, I'm just curious to get a feel. Wonderful. Okay, good, good. Well, they're deals that we can get done. They're not always the easiest deals to get done, and we really have to understand it because, as you know, banks are scrutinized, and so I'll share some more about that. But what I wanted to do is just share a little bit about the vision. With Wells Fargo, our vision is to help our customers succeed financially in all of their financial goals, whether personally or as an investor, a business owner, that kind of thing. And so that's really the premise that we come from of how we approach every relationship that we have with the bank. And the good news, I thought it would be great to share good news, is we have money to lend and we're lending it. So just keep that in mind. Loans and mitigating risk. I think that's the biggest piece with lending is how do you mitigate risk? Every deal has risk, and how do you mitigate that? And being able to be creative and think outside the box and figure out, okay, how can we get this deal done? Because every bank or financial institution has their own box, so to speak, and you have to be able to figure out what deals can get done and what deals can't get done. And what I thought would be great to be helpful for you today would be to share an example of a loan that I've done most recently with an international investor or a few international investors. And I did that with Ching, and we had a great experience partnering together. And this example will kind of talk through some of the details as to what really we actually did in this specific loan. And then we can springboard from there into creative options. So this example is the owner has to be a U.S. citizen of the property, and they have to have at least 51% of the ownership. So you might say, okay, Todd, well, why are you on the panel then if you're talking about international investors? Well, the rest of the story is, yes, thanks, David. He's like, oops, wrong guy. Just kidding. So what we did is we shared with the borrower that lived here in the U.S., had a green card, and works here, that yes, we could lend to them, and that they could be the only signer on the loan. And they were the minority owner of the property. They had a couple other of investors that were from China that didn't have a green card, didn't have any connection to the U.S. as far as being able to mitigate risk. And remember, one definition of mitigating risk is how do we go get our property back, or how do we get our money, or how do we go after the borrower if they don't perform? Well, you can't if they're international. So you have to have somebody that's here. Now, the ownership of the other owners had to be less than 20%, and in this example, that was the case. So what that means is that anybody with more than 20% ownership, we usually underwrite and they're put onto the loan. So in this case, the borrower was 51%, and that was enough for us to actually do the loan, even though they weren't more than 51%. In other words, there was no one else on the loan, and they were just a 51% owner of this investment property. Now, what they did, and for the attorneys in the room, I can't give legal or financial advice. Only you guys can do that, just for the record. But their operating agreement, the way that they set that up, we don't care as a bank how that relationship is with what percent the borrower owns compared to what percent that they gain. Now, in common sense, you would say, okay, well, if I'm, for example, a 90% owner, I should get 90% of the return of the profits from the property. How they set up the operating agreement is really between them and the other investors. So what I mean is that this minority investor may be 51% owner, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's getting 51% of the profits from the property, if that makes sense. It's the other silent investors, international investors, so to speak, that are going to actually be getting the greater return with the property. It's just that's how it worked out for them to be able to do the loan and get the property. This particular example was a single tenant, and the rate that we offered was 3.86% fixed for 5 years with a 5-year reset. And the term that we did was a 6-year term and a 20-year amortization. Any guesses as to why we did 6 years when we usually would do, say, a 5 or a 7 or a 10 or something? I'll give you a hint. It was tied to the length of the lease. The lease expired in 6 years. And so again, banks are always mitigating risk, looking at risk. So the theory is that while they may have opportunity to reset, or that may be written into the lease agreement, we don't know for sure that they're going to stay. So we limit the risk saying, okay, you know that you have 6 years left, then we'll write the loan to the maximum of that amount. So we gave them a loan for 6 years. Then we normally would do a 25-year amortization, but in this case, we did a 20 because it was a special purpose property. Loan to value, special purpose property, we would go 50% maximum. So they came in with the other 50% down, and they were very comfortable with that.
Todd, if it were non-special use property and it was this kind of situation, what would your maximum LTV be with this kind of foreign investment transaction?
Great question. So we would go up to 75% loan to value, and if it was SBA, which I'll touch on that in a moment, we could even go higher, up to possibly 90% loan to value with only 10% down. Ching.
Is there any special regulation on SBA regarding the have a foreign partner involved?
Sure. So SBA, the whole spirit of the program is for U.S. citizens, U.S. companies, that kind of thing. So the way that it would work, which I'm jumping ahead, so I'll skip there. Well, I'm not quite there, so I'll stay here. But I'm going to touch on that in a minute and keep the flow, but I'll answer your question in just 1 second. So banks also, as I mentioned, are tied to some compliance, like the Patriot Act. Michael Coffey with Commercial Lending Group came up to me in the beginning and he said, so Todd, how are you going to address the issue with the Patriot Act that you have to know your customer and have to have met your customer and seen your customer and shaken their hand, so to speak? And we both laughed together. And so in this case, in this example of a real loan that we did, we've never met the other two investors, but they're not on the loan. So I don't technically need to meet them because of the Patriot Act, because I did meet the 51% owner, borrower, met him several times, had good communication, that kind of thing. So just keep in mind when you were dealing with the bank, was the 51%, or the Patriot Act applies, and then also anti-money laundering laws apply. And so we need to make sure that, it's not terrorist money or didn't come from some illegal activity. So we like to see the money in an account in the U.S., usually tied to the primary borrower, for 2 to 3 months. So I would say 3 months is conservative. And usually they just put that money in that account and we get a bank statement. We're able to see that. And my battery is running low. Not the computer's my own. No, I'm kidding. So Loan types, we can do conventional lending like Isaac asked. We can go up to 75% loan to value and do conventional financing with all different property types. If it's special purpose, then we would do a 50% loan to value. Then my wonderful, I call her my sister at the bank, Jessica Beck, who's my partner with SBA, and we team together. You know, it's like Jess was our, I'm his redneck stepson, so Jessica has to be my sister, right? Anyway, the other creative option is doing an owner carryback. Sometimes we can do that, where there'll be a percentage of the deal to get it to work, where the owner will carry back, say, 10 or 20%. And sometimes that's another way to get a deal done. So in conclusion, we're lending, and we have money to lend, and we're excited to do it.
Again, I think we'll hold off on questions until the end for all
Okay.
of the panelists.
Okay, I did want to just touch on Ching's question just briefly, and that is that if you have an international borrower, and we had an owner here that was an owner user, and they occupied at least 51% of the space, but let's say there was other tenants, then we could do that conventionally, or we could do that with SBA. Now, we wouldn't put the international investors, if they have no green card or no U.S. residency here, we wouldn't put them on the loan, but we would put on the loan the tenant that's there, and they could bring in cash for part of the down payment, the investment for the other part of the property, things like that. So we can make that deal work. But because SBA, the spirit of it, it's a government-backed program for U.S. citizens. That's kind of the... Does that answer your question, Ching?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Todd. We're going to move along now to Alan, who's going to speak to us about some of the important parts of FIRPTA and what that means. I think if you use the ZIP forms for your purchase sale agreement, there may even be a section in there about FIRPTA, and so we're going to have Alan just speak to us for a few minutes here on the importance of that and some of the other factors that go into dealing with foreign investors.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks for allowing me to be here. I am going to talk about FIRPTA. I thought when I first heard about it that it was a digestive problem, but I find out it's actually the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act, which basically says what the banks are saying, and that is we want somebody, IRS is saying, we want somebody here that we can go after if the tax is not paid or withheld as part of the transaction. And that's, in this particular instance, we're talking about the buyer. The buyer is responsible for the collection and payment of the withheld amount in a real estate transaction if the seller is a foreign person. And obviously, the reason is what I said earlier, the foreign person is probably not here. They're not here to collect, and so the buyer is the one who is responsible. Because we're talking about, real property, most of the situations where this sale takes place, this transaction takes place, is through an escrow account or an escrow company and a title company. And quite frankly, that is where most of the action is, and that is with those individual escrow companies. My one piece of advice, if you don't remember anything at all what I say today, and that is talk to your escrow agent at the beginning of any real estate transaction in which a foreign person is involved. They can help you walk through it, or in many cases, you better talk to them ahead of time because they may not want to do it. The initial response from an escrow agent is typically, no, we don't do that. But fact of the matter is, yes, they do. But generally speaking, you're going to need to ask them to perform that function, which they are authorized to do, and that is to withhold the funds on behalf of the buyer and disperse them as may be necessary. So what are we talking about, though, in terms of the act itself and the implementation? First of all, we're looking at gross sales prices. So don't look at profit or anything. It's just a gross sales price. Whatever that number is, that's what we're withholding on. There is an exemption from that. That exemption is $300,000 or less, and the transferee is going to have to utilize that property as their personal residence. So this doesn't happen very often. I mean, that price is pretty low these days, so there's probably aren't too many that are falling within that category, but I think it's important to note that the transferee must intend it to be their personal residence. And the reason I mention that, excuse me, is I had a situation about a year or so ago where the escrow agent told the buyer, you're responsible, but we'll do it for you, but you have to, indicate that you're going to occupy it as your personal residence. And he said, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. So why don't you go ahead and withhold it from the seller, which came as quite a shock, I'll have to admit. There should be some discussion with the buyer in that situation as well, because they are in fact responsible for seeing that this is done. So you got the exemption, $300,000 or less. What's the withholding rate? It went up. I know, it's a shock to you. It went up in February of last year. February of 2016, the rate increased. It's sort of a sliding rate, but basically anything between $300,000 and $1 million, it could be 10%, but in most cases it's going to be 15%. But so we're, realistically, you need to look at a 15% withholding rate. And so that's an important consideration. Remember, it's gross sales price. So unless there's enough money in there for withholding, you've got one of the major issues that sometimes crops up, and that is, well, we don't have that much money to withhold. Well, okay, you can't do the deal, I guess. So well, you can, but there are some issues that are need to be addressed there. So what we're talking about, again, is the sale by a foreign person of real estate in the U.S. So we're looking at the withholding amount. The escrow company will act as a qualified agent for the benefit of the buyer, to withhold that sum and pay it over to the Internal Revenue Service. Is it possible to withhold less? And the answer is yes, but, and it's a great big but you have to have a withholding certificate issued by the Internal Revenue Service at the time of the closing of the transaction. So in other words, you have to apply to the IRS. The IRS needs to look at the deal and acknowledge in writing with this withholding certificate that the amount that is required to be withheld is less than the standard rate. So the withholding certificate is the only way that you can get something less than the rate required. One of the other issues, and I'm sort of anticipating questions that I've suggested I could be asked because I think we're running close on time, and that is the taxpayer identification number, the TIN, which is also a practical problem in closing transactions with foreign persons. In order for the funds to be transferred to the Internal Revenue Service, there has to be an identification of the taxpayer. And they're identified through the issuance by the IRS of a taxpayer identification number, a TIN. If you don't have a TIN, you can't pay it to the IRS. They won't accept it, and therefore you can't close again. That's the problem. I had a situation, two actually, with the Internal Revenue Service in which the escrow agent withheld and paid the exact amount required under FIRPTA, but then were billed, and this is why escrow agents aren't real excited about this, the buyer was billed the amount of the withheld, with the required withholding. And the escrow agent said, no, we paid it to you. Well, the IRS must, I don't know what they do, but they must get these checks and forms into their offices, and they give the checks to one person to deposit, and they give the form to another. And unless there is some identification on the check, which will tie it to the form, they say, well, we never got it. So it caused a little bit of consternation. Fortunately, the first amount was small enough that the escrow agent paid it just to stop from arguing with the IRS. The other amount was a little more substantial, but fortunately there was an identification on the check which allowed them to identify the form. So the TIN is, and the identification of payments is a critical issue in this situation. But you have to have that TIN. Now you may get a different a response from escrow companies about this, what I'm about to say, but in my opinion, if the TIN has been applied for, the closing can occur and the funds can be withheld and then paid at the time that the TIN is received. I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, not every escrow agent would be willing to do that or is consistent with my belief as to what the regulations say. But, that's another reason why you should check with your escrow agent with regard to their procedures. It's very often that we get right up to closing or get at closing and there is no TIN, so they want to apply for it. And it takes, you'd think, well, it shouldn't be that difficult. It takes about 6 weeks in my experience to issue a TIN, so people aren't too excited about that. I think we're actually pretty close on time, aren't we?
Keep going, Alan.
Okay. Those are some of the issues that do come up in terms of the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act. I did want to say one thing. My favorite problem that I ever dealt with was a situation in which the husband lived in the U.S., Southern Oregon. His wife, a foreign person, was a citizen of the Philippines. She lived in the Philippines, but the two of them were on title. So we said, well, we've got to get something. We got to resolve this foreign person issue somehow. And he just kept telling us over and over again, well, she doesn't own anything, and I don't owe the tax. Well, that's not good enough. He did receive some advice from an attorney locally who said, well, just have her deed it over to you, and then you can sell it, and you don't have to withhold. The only problem is, as soon as she sells it, you've got the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act application before the actual closing and the money being generated. So don't try to outfox the IRS, because I don't think it's going to work, quite frankly. And as I mentioned earlier, the buyer and or the escrow agent are going to end up being responsible for this, so they're going to be very diligent in terms of making sure that the appropriate deposit is withheld and paid. The amount must be paid to the IRS within 20 days of the actual date of closing. So there is some very significant time limitations on that amount. So a real quick general overview of FIRPTA.
Let's give a big thank you to our panelists today. We do have enough time for questions, and so especially I'm sure there's those of you in the room that maybe haven't had too much exposure with this who probably have quite a few questions. So I don't know if we have a microphone to go around the room or if you just want to stand up and shout. David, why don't you kick us off?
So, Alan, obviously, your comment on planning ahead, I think everybody in the room needs to understand what he said there. You have first contact with somebody that's going to do this, especially if they're in an exchange, understand that money being impacted is going to trigger tax. So what's the best way to address that, Alan, going forward? I know what we've done over the years, but... Yeah,
the typical situation where a transaction is opened, somebody mentioned earlier about the ZIP forms. This is in a residential transaction. There is included in the form itself a designation, are you, the seller, are you a foreign person or not? And hopefully that will identify the issue at that particular moment. If you're not using a form like that, which certainly could happen, that's a very difficult one because you don't really have any certification requirements until almost to the time of closing. So I would, quite frankly, if I was involved in a real estate transaction, particularly as a buyer, I would make a routine inquiry of the seller that, I need you to sign this non-foreign status affidavit because having that in hand then provides the protection that you need if the IRS ever comes running to you and says, well, wait a minute. They go, well, look, I've got this. And that, generally speaking, that non-foreign status affidavit should be sufficient to cover you. Oh, you're going to ask me a hard question?
I am. I totally am. One quick caveat. So obviously, if you have a foreign seller who's a foreign national, they're probably going to be not a resident of Oregon either. So do you want to talk about the Oregon tax as well when you have a foreign seller?
Yes. Actually, that even, the Oregon withholding requirement is even beyond a foreign person. It's really an out-of-state or non-Oregon citizen. There is a requirement for withholding for people outside the state of Oregon. So it's again, non-resident state or foreign person, they're going to have an additional withholding requirement with the state of Oregon that is, generally speaking, again, based on the gross amount of 4%. It's a lot easier to exempt yourself from it. I've seen any number of liars on the form that they have to sign. The escrow agent, however, once they determine that they are suspicious in terms of the amount or the basis on which they're claiming an exemption, are required to mail that exemption to the Department of Revenue at the state of Oregon to allow them to hunt them down and extract every last penny that they possibly can.
Middle of the room, Craig. And I believe Brent McLean had a question as well.
Oh, you said the IRS would agree to a lesser sum if you provided documentation. Would that mean like in the form of showing the adjusted basis on the property and a gain relative to the sale price?
Yes. Basically, what they're going to be looking for before they issue a certificate of withholding that is going to be a different amount, they're going to want to examine the transaction. So that transaction certainly would include sales price, adjusted basis, all the other issues that go into determining the actual profit or benefit to the individual. Yes.
Alan, question is a foreign investor, are they going to still require these withholdings if they're going to do an exchange and move the investment forward?
I believe the answer to that is yes.
Thank you.
Craig's getting his steps in today. You got a Fitbit, Craig?
Sorry, I'm a reformed escrow officer, so I'm thinking of all the things that come up in closing that you might not think of. So the other thing that we didn't address, and this would apply to anybody on the panel, is when you have a foreign party engaged in a transaction, making arrangements for them to sign the closing documents and how that has to happen, depending on whether or not they are in a country that is part of the agreement. What is the name of that agreement? I can't remember, but.
Oh, the notary acknowledgement agreement? Yeah, it's, actually, you can work your way around that one. Were they knowledgeable and creative and fully understanding title company?
I want to piggyback the title company escrows that we have experience as we close many transactions when our clients is outside in other country.
Yes.
Doesn't matter which country. But I want to give a tip is any notarized documents, you cannot, our escrow won't accept any notary from other office outside of U.S. other than U.S. Embassy. So,
Well,
oh, so now it's better.
well, that's not entirely accurate. It depends upon the escrow agent and the title company. The statute, which I have applied when I was employed by First American, applied rather creatively and liberally, does say that it is an acceptable notary if the person is authorized to do a notary acknowledgement type of activity by the country in which they're located. Most escrow agents say, no, you got to go to the American Embassy and that's it. But no, I would not accept that as an appropriate
Great
answer.
to know. So first American title, because we always have to make exceptional, like 7 days ahead of time, because they have to make appointment with the U.S. Embassy, and U.S. Embassy only work certain days for the notarize.
Yeah.
So we
Well-
calculate into a.
Well, I'm not employed there any longer, so you may have to convince my successor, but I'm more than happy to talk to him and suggest to him that he be a little bit more understanding, yes.
Thank you.